I watched that 9-part story, so you don't have to. That's Kamrin, and she's telling us the story of how she met this guy, and he was nothing like who he said he was. So when she first met him, he was very charming. He was very intentional. He seemed to be very like on track to want to date, to get married. They met at apartment 200 here in LA. He walked up to her and he said something along the lines of, oh, you seem like you're not even interested in me, so I'm not going to say anything. And then she was like, oh, why would you think I wasn't interested in you? Now, mind you, her friend already had spotted him and she was trying to shoot her shot, but one of his friends ended up pulling her away. So she ended up talking to Walter Quincy Urbana, but we're going to call him Quincy. So they're standing there and they're talking, and he says, oh, you know, I usually don't ask girls out. I actually don't even really date, but you seem really cool. I would like to get to know you. And she's like, okay. And he said something like, oh, I would love to take you to lunch. And she's like, okay, green flag. You want to take me to lunch and you want to take me on a date? This is great. Let's exchange information. While she was at the club, she did end up seeing him like talking to another girl, but she was like, it's too early for me to be tripping. It's whatever. So after the club, he's messaging her, basically trying to get her to come to his friend's house who lives nearby. And she's like, no, I know like how that goes. I'm not about to play into your hands. We can see each other tomorrow. So she kind of like declined, and he eventually was just like, it's okay, I really want to see you tomorrow anyway. So she was like, okay, cool, green flag, you're still being persistent and you're still wanting to see me tomorrow. The whole way that Kamrin found out that Quincy wasn't who he was saying he was because she ended up helping him with a social media post, right? So she does social media. She was like, hey, I can help you, you know, get your career off the ground. Let me do a video for you. They filmed kind of like a thirst trap. She posts the video, it ends up going viral. Underneath the comments, within 3 hours, several women were commenting under the post saying things like, he did that shit to me as well, claiming that they knew him, all types of things. So apparently one of the girls that ended up reaching out to Kamrin was actually his girlfriend at the time, right? So while he was trying to shoot a shot at Kamrin at apartment 200, he actively had a girlfriend. So that girl ended up reaching out to Kamrin. So they're cross-referencing notes. Come to find out, that night when he left the club, he had called his girlfriend and said like, oh, I ran into a bunch of girls at the club, and you know, one of them tried to shoot their shot basically. So because Kamrin helped make that post for Quincy, all this information is coming to her doorstep. She ends up finding out that he's a deadbeat dad. She ends up finding out that he had a girlfriend. The person that he said that he was engaged to, he was never engaged to. He had just given her a promise ring. All this comes out, right? So let's back up a little bit. So they had just met at apartment 200. They exchanged information. He ends up messaging her the next day and trying to meet with her. She ends up being busy, right? Mind you, Kamrin's not looking for a relationship. She's not looking to have a boyfriend. Like, she's not interested in any of that. He was just so charming, and he just seemed so intentional. He just kept giving green flags. They end up FaceTiming that night, and they end up talking for like 2-3 hours, right? It was a great conversation. Mind you, he's being so forward. He is presenting himself as being single. So after the FaceTime conversation, they end up making plans to meet the next day at Pan Pacific Park. They end up being there for what she said was like 8 hours, right? They end up having a great conversation. They really hit it off. But she says in hindsight now, looking back on things, he was being very calculated. He basically was hearing what she had to say and was molding himself to be that person. Just being very strategic with his responses and how he was presenting himself. On the date, he ends up telling her like, oh, my ex was like super like serious. She was very like schedule oriented. I'm looking for somebody that goes with the flow, that's spontaneous. And Kamrin sitting there like, wow, that's like what I'm looking for. Like, I'm very like go with the flow. And then he also mentioned like, oh, you know, I was casting for Love Island and I decided not to do it because that wasn't dating with intention, and I really want to date to get married, and that's important to me. So she's just like, okay, like this guy is saying all the buzzwords. Kamrin said that even though they only dated for like 3 weeks, the amount of time they spent talking about marriage was excessive, and he was obviously like trying to plant seeds. Then he goes on to tell Kamrin the story about his ex-fiancée and how they were planning to have a family together and get married and all these other things, until he learned that she was in North Carolina. His boy hit him up like, hey, isn't this your fiance? She's doing something weird out here, da-da-da-da. And then he like couldn't believe it, and then I guess they ended up getting into a fight when she got back shortly after that, and they got drunk. I guess his ex-fiance ended up blurting out like, that's why I cheated on you, or something like that, and that's why they ended up breaking off their engagement. He showed her like engagement photos and all these things, right? Later on, Kamrin finds out like none of that was true. Kamrin felt like he was using the fiance story to like gain sympathy and like get her to like feel for him and like feel connected. Felt like he was doing a really good job of painting himself as a victim, as someone that was betrayed, you know, completely just like done wrong by others. And he was also trying to like paint this picture of being this like hardworking, I have 3 jobs, I'm going for my 2nd degree, like I'm really like out here hustling, I'm ambitious, I'm sweet, I'm kind. I really wanted her to get this feeling that he was just this great guy that was just getting done wrong by women over and over again. They were talking at the park for a very long time. They got into family life, and he really wanted her to understand that he does not have a good relationship with his biological mother. He went as far as to say that his mother was bipolar, and that was also the reason for their horrible relationship. Again, continuing to paint this picture that he's this victim. Also, he told her over and over again, bringing up his ex-fiancée, like how she cheated on him, how she broke his heart, all these things. So they end up leaving the park. He says that he has to go to his friend's house, and then she ends up texting him like, hey, oh, I have your sweater, like, my bad, do you want to get back? And he's like, oh, it's just another reason for me to like see you, you know, soon. And she's like, okay, smooth. And then on the flip side, she ends up finding out that he's also at the time texting his active girlfriend, and she's messaging him like, hey, I'm gonna take a nap. Oh, like, why aren't you responding to me? I'm getting annoyed. And he's like, woman, I'm with my boys, I'm playing basketball. And she's like, we already said you were gonna get food. And he's like, well, we ended up playing ball, you know? And so he was really trying to like juggle these things. Because she posted that viral video, she's receiving all this information now. The ex-fiance has reached out, the girlfriend has reached out, she's hearing about everything. She ends up finding out that he doesn't have a horrible relationship with his mother. She just be on his ass. She'd be like, you need to do better, you need to get your life in order, and he hates that, and they end up arguing. So that's why he wants to tell people, oh, my mother's bipolar. All a lie. The woman that came forward also told Kamrin he uses women for money. He'll use their credit cards without them knowing it. He'll use their car. He'll live in their houses. Like, he takes full advantage of women financially. And so Kamrin was like, that didn't happen to me because A, it was only 3 weeks, and on top of that, I was in the middle of moving across the country. So like, I had moved out of my house. I made him help me move out of my house. Like, he was over here working. And then she had shipped her car away, so she didn't have a car either. And so she was actually spending more time at his place and having him drive her around and do things that she needed to do in order to prepare to move across the country. So he didn't really get a chance to be able to use her financially. What he was able to do was be able to get her help in order to get that viral video. And apparently he has like a history of like filing lawsuits and trying to take people, you know, down legally. She's like, I have the money for that. Please, let's play. Like, bring it on, kind of thing. One of the women also told her that he was trying to use her card to get a membership to Equinox. She ends up looking on her statement and she's like, why am I getting these charges for Equinox? I don't even live in that area. So she ends up calling it, getting canceled. Obviously, he couldn't go to Equinox anymore, but they're over there just like, what in the world? So backtracking back to when Kamrin and Quincy were first getting to know each other, Kamrin ends up hitting up Quincy and being like, hey, I have a friend in town, come to the hotel. So he comes and he brought food with him, right? Which Kamrin was like, that's kind of weird. In her experience, when people bring food to places, it's like a sign of like financial struggle, especially somewhere where you know you can order food. She was like, they had ordered a bunch of food anyway. She was like, just come. Mind you, everything at the pool was being covered by the friend's like company that flew him out. So she was like, he really didn't need to bring any food. After they all leave, they're coordinating to meet at Barney's Beanery, and he ends up texting Kamrin and being like, hey, I left my food in your friend's hotel, can you get it for me? And Cameron's like, that's weird, we had all that food, but yeah, no problem, I'll text my friend. So she texts her friend, and we'll call her friend Red. She texts Red, and Red's like, oh, I thought this was your food, I ate the pasta or whatever that was here. So she ends up hitting Quincy and being like, hey, sorry, Red ate it. And apparently Quincy was a little upset. She was like, oh, I'm so sorry, like, it's gone, whatever. He ends up meeting them at Barney's Beanery. They're all eating, and he's like, oh, I'm not ordering anything. And she's like, why? That's weird. There's like 5 of us here. Like, order, like, just eat. He's like, no, money's a little tight right now. I just paid $1,200 to go to school. And she's like, first of all, what school do you go to where the entire semester is $1,200? Like, great deal. Second of all, okay, like, well, we're all ordering a bunch of food anyway, just like have some, you know, so it's fine. So at this point, she's kind of paid for his food. She's ordered like 4 Ubers throughout this night. He hasn't contributed in any way, and she's just like kind of getting triggered. Past relationships to reminding her. So she's like, I'm gonna have a talk with him about this. Even her friends said something like, oh, it's kind of weird he didn't contribute in any way. He was claiming that he was gonna buy this Tesla, or somehow he ended up with like an old ass Mercedes. And then he was like, oh, I was actually rich before I did Forex, I made a bunch of money, like all these things, right? So the night ends up ending, and she hits him up and she's like, hey, like, I really didn't appreciate like how I had to cover for everything. Like, I'm really not looking to be anybody's sugar mama. That's basically what Kamrin tells him. And he responds back really well. He's not upset. He's like, yo, I completely understand. She said she appreciated how he responded back to her calling him out about making her feel like a sugar mama, essentially. And at the time, he was claiming that like he owned this house. Later on, she finds out it was like another family member's house. But he was like, oh, some like pipes burst in the house, and that was like $15,000, and that wiped me out, and all this and this and that. And Kamrin's just like, look, I'm just letting you know, financial situations, that's a deal breaker for me. So at this point, they're about 6 days into dating, and she had repeatedly said, like, I don't date men with children. I don't date deadbeats for sure. Like, she has brought it up over and over again. So one day, they're talking about deadbeats again, and she notices that there's a picture of a baby in the back of his phone, and she's like, who's that? And he's like, oh, it's my friend, da da da. And she's like, that's weird that you have like your friend's baby picture in the back of your phone, but whatever. This one, she has no idea that he actually has a child, and he has a 5-year-old child at that. And he claims that he speaks to the child all the time, calls her regularly, sends money, completely present, right? None of that is true. Mind you, she's asked him straight up, like, do you have children? And he said no. Come to find out, that baby picture that was in the back of his phone was actually his girlfriend's at the time. It was her baby pictures. Fast forward, Kamrin tells the girlfriend, like, oh yeah, I saw a baby picture in the back of his phone. I thought it was him. And she's like, no, that's me. So he had the ex-girlfriend's baby picture in the back of his phone while actively dating Kamrin. So Kamrin and Quincy are still talking. They're getting to know each other more. They're talking about childhood traumas, their fears around marriage and commitment. And she's telling him, yeah, like, I have fears around those things. Like, it's really hard for me. They're laying down, and he tells her, like, yo, I have something to tell you. Her heart immediately drops into her stomach. She's like, what is this man about to say? So he goes on to preface the story and says, I've had a lot of women do me wrong, and that's just the story of my life, right? And he goes on to basically allege and ultimately tell her that he does have a child, but it's because he was essayed, and that's why he has a child. The baby mama apparently essayed him and then kept the baby, and that's how he ended up with a child. They ended up talking about that topic for 40 minutes. Before he ultimately told her that this all led to him having a child, he was weaving, bobbing, going around the bush before he just said it plainly, like, I have a child, right? When she talked to the baby mama and was like, hey, this is what he's saying and how the baby was conceived, she was like, absolutely not. I'm going to press any type of legal charges that I can against him for saying something like that. Mind you, he's claiming that he's paying child support, he's talking to the baby, he's doing all of this stuff weekly. Not only was he no contact with his daughter, he owed thousands and thousands of dollars in back child support. He painted the baby mama out to be this like gold digger that was so sure that he was going to make so much money overseas, and trapped him and was like just so obsessed with him. The baby mama's side of the story is that they were very much in a relationship when the baby was conceived, and that he ended up cheating on her multiple times before she ultimately left him. And then Kamrin's sitting there like looking at him like, dude, there's no first with you. You've been engaged, you've had a baby, you've done everything that there is to do. Despite Quincy being a massive manipulator, Kamrin said that he was never unkind to her. He was always intentional. He was always sweet. So like learning all of this was obviously a shock. She said from the moment she found out about this until she was posting this, she was like crying her eyes out. Now, why he thought he could post a video on TikTok and it'd go viral and people not come forward after being such a terrible human being, I don't know. Skeletons don't go away. So she's at a Nike event. She's gone, right? She puts up that post up for him. Within moments, it's popping off. And that ex-girlfriend ends up commenting saying, if only you guys knew. When Kamrin saw that comment and then approached Quincy about it, he claimed, oh, that's just a scorned woman, just delete it and block her. That immediately sent off a red flag in Kamrin's brain, because she's like, why would I do that? Like, obviously there's more to this story. So Quincy's claiming, like, I haven't talked to my ex-girlfriend in a month and a half. I blocked her on everything. He even ended up sending Kamrin like 18 screenshots of his call logs to show that he wasn't talking to his ex-girlfriend. But while sending her those screenshots, he also proved that he was never talking to his daughter either. And at this point, she was like, okay, I'm just going to let him think everything is fine, that I believe him. And so she ends up having him pick her up when she comes back from the Nike event. And they're driving, right? And so she picks the conversation back up. He starts going off. She starts going off. She's banging her hand on the dashboard. He, I guess, pulls off to the side at one point and then just pulls off, driving mad fast in like this residential area, trying to scare her essentially, right? After talking in the car for like 3.5 some hours, he ends up admitting to everything, being like, yeah, I talked to her last Thursday. It's my childhood trauma that makes me lie. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, basically like trying to come forward, but not really. Like, she notices he gives you a bit of the truth, not all of the truth. After getting receipts back from the ex-girlfriend though, Kamrin had seen that they were talking sexual. He was even trying to sleep with the ex-girlfriend in the back of her car while Kamrin was upstairs sleeping. because obviously he's gonna bring her inside. At this point, he's sitting there crying his eyes out, begging her to forgive him, like saying, I'll never do this again, like I'm gonna do better, I made a mistake, I give you access to my phone, you can have like my passwords and all that. And Cameron's like, I would never want to be in a relationship where I would need the password to your phone, like absolutely not. And so she just told him like, I can't do this anymore. He's begging, he's like, let me come back tomorrow, let me set things straight. And she's just like, look, I don't even know. She goes inside, and then after like thinking about it a little bit, she's like, no, blocks him on everything. And she's like, this is a dangerous man. Like, she heard from other women that he had abused some of these women. She's like, no, like I actually think you're unsafe. So she posted his picture. She said his name is Walter Quincy Urbana. She's like, I'm pretty sure he's a narcissist, he's a sociopath. The way he can lie and just keep a straight face and build on the lies, it's just too much. And so she just put his picture out there. I'm going to share the screenshot of her video sharing his picture just so you guys know what he looks like. Please beware. Quincy ends up showing up the next day to her house and knocking on the door. Her roommate ends up going down there, and he's like alleging that he's trying to like return AirPods or something like that. After like talking back and forth with the roommate, Cameron's like, what is going on? It should have been like, here, give me, bye, you know? So she goes down there, she starts going off on him. She's like, you deadbeat. She called him every name under the sun that describes a deadbeat daddy. Even the AirPods was like a whole thing, because she thought that she lost his brother's AirPods that were like an heirloom at this point with like initials on them and stuff. Come to find out, it was actually his ex-girlfriend's AirPods. And so that's why she was like, yeah, bring me back my AirPods that I gave you because I thought I lost yours. Like, no. Like, I mean, when I say this man lied about everything that he could possibly lie about, he really outdid himself. People like this, I can lie about just about anything, are absolutely terrifying to me. Ladies, please be safe. Take your time. She found all of this out in 3 weeks, and the minute she found out, she peaced out. So kudos to you. A lot of people stay, they try to make excuses, they try to explain things away. You took everything for face value. You believed these women when they told you what they told you. You pressed him. He didn't have no logical answers for you, so you dipped. That, I think, in itself is a lesson. Shout out to you, girl. You're dope. You're beautiful. Keep striving. Keep doing you. Outside of that, you guys tagged me in this bunch. I wanted to make sure I got it out to you guys. I appreciate you guys as always. I hope you have a beautiful day. As always, this is here for you. Bye.